I acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land and waters across the country and wherever you may be. Today, I am on the traditional lands of the Kulin people, in particular, Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung, and I welcome you to this land. I pay my respects to the spirit ancestors, elders past and present and emerging.
The Argus, Melbourne Vic, 1848 to 1957. Friday 11th of November 1938, page 1. New campaign against Jews Nazi outbreaks. Synagogues burnt, shops wrecked, sequel to shooting. The Argus Independent Cable Service. Berlin, Thursday. A campaign against the Jews, almost unparalleled in its violence, has broken out in all parts of the Reich. It is the sequel to the fatal shooting of Herr von Rath, a secretary at the German embassy in Paris, by a young Jew. Synagogues have been burnt, Jewish shops have been smashed and set on fire and looted, and several thousand Jews have been arrested. The extent of the damage has been so great that many Germans are said to have expressed their disapproval of it, and to have described it as senseless. Most of the damage has been done in Berlin and at Munich, Hamburg, Hanover and Leipzig by bands of Nazis armed with crowbars, who paraded the streets in cars and then began their attacks on shops and other buildings owned by Jews. Streets strewn with glass. According to a
And so we go to the museum. And what should we do? Weep? No. My good friends, we never try to tell the tale to make people weep. It's too easy. We didn't want pity. If we decided to tell the tale, it is because we wanted the world to be a better world. Just a better world. And learn and remember. What is our role? We must become the messengers.
My name is Jane Josem. I'm the Museum Director and CEO of the Jewish Holocaust Centre. On behalf of our board, our staff and volunteers, it's a great honour to be part of this celebration of William Cooper's legacy, an incredible example to all of someone who stood up for others. William Cooper's significance is not that he was the only one who stood up after the terrible, horrific events of Kristallnacht. It's the fact that his own people were being oppressed at that time, and this fact made him and others empathise greatly with the Jews in Germany who were being stripped of their citizenship and denied their human rights in 1938. We've been promoting William Cooper's story to all who visit our museum since we were first made aware of it, and we will continue our pivotal role to educate students about this great Australian man. Right now, I'd like to share with you a presentation about the events of Kristallnacht that features Holocaust survivor testimony. Thank you.
Those that know a little bit of history will know that the term Kristallnacht was termed not by any historian or any man of prominence, but by the Nazi machine, who described the event as Kristall because of the number of windows destroyed during that night between the 9th and the 10th of November. And when you got up in the morning and you could see all that, you realize that this wasn't crystal, but this was the glass broken by the Hitler regime.
What happened, it was well organized that all over Germany, all the Jewish prayer houses, synagogues were burned to the ground, many hundreds, except 76, they could not burn to the ground because they were too close to us, a property like the one in the village where I was born, but they completely destroyed it from inside.
I was on my way home from school, and I saw a lot of SS and SR and Hitler use, and I thought, oh well, another march, another something. So I went to my girlfriends and we got talking, and I got long later than I thought. And when I got home, my mother was frantic. She thought something has happened to me.
They were burning synagogues on the streets. The black smoke came up in Berlin over all the sky. And people were beaten up. Shops like Myers, David Jones, and places like that were plundered. The goods were thrown out on the streets, and the people beaten up.
I was woken up around about 11 o'clock, a large number of men shouting, screaming, carrying torches, and blaring songs and shouting. And we heard crashes, we heard thuds.
And we lived in an apartment house where the caretaker was a very nice Czechoslovakian-born lady, and she came up to our apartment and she said to my mother, Mrs. Jakon, quickly tell your son, who was 18 at the time, in 38, to come down to the cellar. They're coming to collect the Jews. And when they came to our daughter and they asked any man present, and my mother said, no, I'm a widow with 2 daughters. And they said, where's your boy? And they said, oh, I don't know, he must be on the road somewhere, I don't know where he is. So they left again.
During the day, the synagogue was attacked. They tried to burn it down during the day, but they couldn't do it. The professionals came back at night and did it. On the night of the 10th of November, they did it. I remember on the 11th of November, I went to see what had happened, and I noticed that the Torah scroll had been torn up into shreds, and bits of the Torah floating in the gutter down the drain.
We were called by our youth leader, and we were assembled in a truck, and we went to the synagogue called Fasanenstraße. It was already in flames. We were forming a chain, and some of the older madrichim ran in and saved in the fire and saved whatever they could. And they came out with the holy scrolls and books and ornaments, and we passed it down the chain into the truck.
We went to see people my father knew. I went with him, and I remember seeing a woman on the floor, writhing, sort of in hysterics, and men standing there just shaken, just not knowing what to do.
And I remember outside where Hitler used standing there laughing and started to fight with us. And some of our guys lay bleeding on the floor.
The Jewish women had to clean up on the following Shabbat. It's the holy day of the week for Jewish people. The mess they had created, the Nazis had created, and over 30,000 Jewish men were taken to concentration camps.
So remember, coming to Australia in 1939 as a 17-year-old, and I was shown a cutting, if I'm not mistaken, from the Argus, about Aborigines raising their voice against Jewish persecution, whilst the then President of the United States had only one word: it's unbelievable. The rest of the world was silent. But William Cooper and his Aboriginal League had the courage, in spite of all their problems, to care and not be bystanders, to care for another people. Thank you.
Partisan Song is a song of hope composed in the Vilna Ghetto in 1943. It was sung in the ghettos and forests of Europe and became the anthem of survivors. We have compiled 30 language translations as well as Nunga, which is a WA indigenous language. It was performed in Perth in front of 2,000 people, including Lance Turner, Uncle Boydie's son, and William Cooper's great-grandson.
William Cooper was a Yorta Yorta man with connection to Maloga Mission and Cumraganga Aboriginal Reserve. For much of his life, he worked as a shearer and handyman and became an outspoken lobbyist for Aboriginal rights. He was an active member of the Australian Workers' Union, protesting on behalf of the communities of Central Victoria and Western New South Wales who were ineligible for aid during the 1920s drought and the 1930s depression, but officials ignored his complaints. In 1933, undeterred by age and deafness, he left Cumraganga so that he could apply for the old age pension, as residents of Aboriginal reserves were ineligible. He was instrumental in the formation of the Australian Aborigines League, the first Aboriginal organisation, of which he became secretary. The AAL fought for enfranchisement, direct representation in Parliament, and land rights. He was part of the first Aboriginal deputation to the Prime Minister to request that Aboriginal affairs come under federal control. And despite collecting 1,814 signatures from Aborigines all over Australia, the Commonwealth declined to forward his petition to King George V or to seek to amend the Constitution. In 1938, he and other Aboriginal leaders held the Day of Mourning, the Aboriginal response to Australia's 150th anniversary celebration. It was the first national gathering of Indigenous people protesting against the prejudice and discrimination that was a daily part of their lives, and marked the beginning of the modern Aboriginal political movement. In 1938, he walked with other members of the Australian Aborigines League across Melbourne to the German consulate to deliver a letter registering their opposition to the persecution of Jews by the Nazis. At a time when Aboriginal people were experiencing injustice and inequality, they put energy into protesting on behalf of people on the other side of the world. The Day of Mourning was the forerunner to a National Aborigines Day, which has since become NAIDOC, celebrated for a week. William Cooper spent his last years continuing to protest to the state and federal governments and for Aboriginal representation in Parliament and alienation of Cumraganga, Corranderk and other Aboriginal reserves, citing the rights of Maoris and Canadian Indians as an example for Australia. He returned home to his ancestral lands of Cumraganga, where he rests today.
I want to talk about the courage and bravery of the Yorta Yorta men and women who stood beside Uncle William Cooper. This courage and bravery has always shone as a beacon to the similarly courageous First Nations communities across this vast continent of ours. It has also shone as a beacon to the world, never more so than in the case of the strong objection presented in the form of a letter to the German Council upon hearing the news of the atrocities of Kristallnacht. Of course, this was only a shadow of the unimaginable horrors that would follow in the ensuing years. Unimaginable, perhaps, to all but the First Nations people of this continent, who saw the template of a Holocaust as it had been acted out on our own people by the British. The prelude to Pecan Summer draws on the strength of the Yorta Yorta knowledge and wisdom and is sung in our ancient language thanks to the translation work of Sharon Atkinson.
The Australian Aborigines League was an Aboriginal-led organisation established in 1933. The AAL platform casts the light of the unjust treatment of Aboriginal people and campaigned for the repeal of discriminatory legislation, enfranchisement, land rights and representation in Parliament. Only Aboriginal people could be full members, but non-Aboriginal people were admitted as associate members. Membership and supporters of the Australian Aborigines League included Arthur Burdeau, President, William Cooper, Honorary Secretary, Lynch Cooper, Assistant Secretary, Margaret Tucker, Vice President, Doug Nichols, Treasurer, Members of the League's executive included Shadrach James, Hillis Spriggs, Ebenezer Lovett, May Lovett, Martha Niven, and Mr. A. Clark, Anna Morgan, Caleb Morgan, and George Patton. Non-Aboriginal supporters included Claude Smith, JP, Mrs. Nora Smith, and Miss Helen Bailey.
In researching the local history of Seddon and early Footscray, I have discovered the great early work of local residents to advance the Aboriginal cause. In the 1930s, William Cooper, Margaret Tucker lived very close to a couple called Claude and Nora Smith. Claude Smith was a Justice of the Peace and the acknowledged historian of Footscray at that time, a place that he would refer to as Iramu after the Aboriginal name. He and his wife Nora were described by both Margaret Tucker and William Cooper as being great and proven friends and helpers. Margaret Tucker described their home at 48 Pentland Parade as being more like her home because she was treated like one of the family. She was to end up living there for quite some time with her husband, Phil, and daughter, Molly. And the home was located near the Seddon station, and the local community would help with various causes. Margaret Tucker's autobiography also recalls that it was nothing to have 20 Aboriginals there for a Sunday roast, somehow everyone fitting around the dining table before retiring to the sitting room for a musical evening where they would practice for performances and just enjoy each other's company. Clem Smith, Claude's youngest son, remembers William and Lynch Cooper, Margaret Tucker, Doug Nichols, Harold Blair as being regular visitors. Retiring to the sitting room, they would sing grand old hymns and Aboriginal songs, and singing was accompanied by guitar, mandolin, banjo, ukulele, and gum leaves. And if people didn't have an instrument, Claude Smith apparently provided the ukuleles. Apparently one evening, Margaret Tucker was to say, reflecting on Indigenous land loss, how about, someone giving some land back? Claude Smith, who was present, said, "All right, I will." And he did.
Hi, I'm Lior, and I'd like to share a song of mine with you today. It's called Safety of Distance. And whilst this song is about peace and reconciliation, its overarching theme and message stems from a central line, which is compassion is the measure of a man. I believe that William Cooper and his actions were the embodiment of this notion. William Cooper has been a source of inspiration for me, and I believe he will continue to do so for future generations to come. This is a performance which I did fairly recently with my good friend Paul Grabowski. It's a real privilege to be part of this tribute to such a great man. Here is Safety of Distance.
It won't bring back lovers and friends. Ooh, how but it might make for a happier end. Well, there is hope in the land of ruins, in the village of old enemies, who will come to join hands, for they share the knowledge. Compassion is the measure of a man. It won't bring back lovers and friends. But it might make for a happier end. Now the colors will return to these hills, where the dust of despair takes a hold. One day they will drink from these nice stale waters. Where there's a will, there's a road. It won't bring back lovers and friends. How, but it might make for a happier Compassion is the measure of a man.
Thanks everybody for coming along to support us today. It's been a great walk this morning. We've stopped up at the William Cooper Justice Centre, which was officially opened on the 6th of October. I'm sure some of you know, but probably not all, that the new court precinct up here in the corner of William and Lonsdale, on the 6th of October this year, was named the William Cooper Justice Centre. You know, that's an amazing feat for a man who fought all his life seeking justice. All his life.
Indeed, the march that William Cooper organised and the presentation of that petition that was reenacted today was the first public demonstration against the Nazi regime and the treatment of the Jews in Europe in the world.
The New South Wales Illawarra Mercury reported, the Dubbo branch of the Aborigines Progressive Association sent a telegram to the Australian Aborigines League supporting its action in approaching the Consul for Germany in Melbourne, protesting against the treatment of the Jews by the Nazi government.
The Jewish people were murdered, their places and their businesses were burnt by the Nazi party in Germany, and I think that he knew this because it was written up in the papers every day, and he knew what trouble they were in and stood up for them. Whenever anyone was in trouble, he said, "Sonny, you go and help them." So that's the way Grandfather thought of other people. We protest wholeheartedly at the cruel persecution of the Jewish people by the Nazi government in Germany.
Nice to meet you. There are millions. I want to thank you.
Hello everyone, thank you for inviting me to participate in this event. It's always an honour and a privilege to be involved in these events which commemorate the legacy of William Cooper. I was extremely honoured to be involved in the recreation of William Cooper's march on the German consulate in Melbourne. We did that 8 years ago, so that must make it 82 years since the events in question. There I met for the first time Uncle Boydie and Abe Schwartz and a number of other people who've been doing sterling work over the last 8+ years in seeking to commemorate the memory of William Cooper and his very important legacy. I'm glad we were able to do something in this COVID year, notwithstanding the restrictions that we're still under here in Victoria. Let's hope that this time next year we can all get together again in the flesh and see each other once more as we continue this important work. Thank you again.
What I do think is very interesting that in all the years that William protested about the treatment of his people, never once did he do a protest march. He mainly wrote letters, petitions, and organised meetings with MPs, Prime Ministers, etc. The only time he ever led a protest march was on behalf of the Jewish people. So I think that's a very interesting point.
This is the building that grandfather wanted the letter to reach to Hitler at that time.
I am pleased to have the honour to recognise formally on behalf of the government of the Federal Republic of Germany both the protest note and your grandfather's commitment. As Federal Foreign Office Special Representative for Relations with Jewish Organizations, I am also pleased to have this opportunity to express on behalf of the federal government and the people of Germany my profound respect and sincere gratitude to you, your grandfather, and the Australian Aborigines League. We thank you for standing up for the Jews in Germany during the Nazi regime and for keeping alive the memory of this courageous act of solidarity against the Nazis.
So they marched to the German ambassador residence and knocked on the door, and they wouldn't come out and speak to them. So the security moved them on, they told them they had to move, and they left the letter of protest with the security people.
Scheindler, Gebschu Schneider, Sklar Yosef.
Dear Uncle Boydie, I still remember November 9th, 2017 very well. Almost at the end of at the conclusion of the ceremony commemorating the November pogrom of 1938, there was an announcement that someone from Australia wanted to speak. And so you did. It was a very moving speech, and it was said that only then did I realize that someone on the other side of the earth would protest the persecution of Jews in Germany and in Europe. I am very grateful to have heard your words and sincerely hope that there will be also commemoration for your people who have suffered so much. I wish you the very best. Yours sincerely, Yona Sifas, a rabbi of the Jewish community in Berlin.
I've had two very special moments in my community life over the last 40 years. One was to spend almost 2 hours with Yitzhak Rabin in Jerusalem in 1995, explaining the need for peace. And the other very special occasion was in Berlin with Uncle Boydie, when he presented a copy of the letter that William Cooper had tried to deliver to the German consulate. It was a very special evening at the Australian Embassy, and the emotion And the excitement and the sheer joy on Uncle Boydie's face and all his family's was to be treasured. And we do. It's a memory that I'll never forget, nor my wife, Andrea, who was with me. It was a very, very special moment. I'm also delighted that the Council of Christians and Jews continues its support of the William Cooper legacy.
Shalom. I'd like to pay tribute to those people 82 years ago from the Australian Aborigines League, including Mr. William Cooper, who stood up and protested the atrocities that had been done to the Jewish people on Kristallnacht all those 82 years ago. May their souls be blessed, and may we all take inspiration from their actions today. When we see injustice, when we see bigotry, when we see racism, they and their actions should inspire us to speak up and be an upstander. I would like to wish everybody peace. Please sing with me. Let us bless each other with goodness and that power, that energy to stand up in the face of adversity. Ose shalom bimromav, uyase shalom aleinu, vi'al kol ha'olam, imru, amen. Let us say amen. May the soul of William Cooper and all those that marched from the AAL 82 years ago be blessed. May their memory be for a blessing on us all.
In March 1938, Hitler marched unannounced into Austria without as much as a gunshot. Thus was Austria incorporated into Nazi Germany. In October 1938, Jews were told to leave Austria provided they had permission to enter another country. My mother and her mother were granted permission to work in England. It was harder for men to get visas, so my grandfather remained in Austria, where he was picked up on Kristallnacht and sent to Dachau. He remained there for around a year, where he recalled the bitter cold and harsh labour conditions, but spoke little more about it. Fortunately, he was released thanks to an appeal from a friend and the help of a stranger. This backstory is the profound connection I feel between my family and human rights activist William Cooper, who with the Australian Aborigines League protested in Melbourne against Kristallnacht. Fast forward, and in 2018 I was honoured to be asked to represent Uncle Boydie, William Cooper's grandson, to make a case for an electorate name change in Victoria to Cooper. That, along with other submissions, was successful. The experience was exhilarating. Thank you.
One of the articles of the UN Declaration of Human Rights is to protect the rights of others, and William Cooper embodied this down to his very soul. I ask of all of you to consider, what can you do to uphold William Cooper's legacy in protecting the rights of others? It's a big question, and leading up to the UN International Human Rights Day, I think it's one we should all be considering and try to work out what we can do from our area of influence. My sphere of influence is music, and so this is what I can do, and I'm going to offer you tonight a song which could work for you as a mantra for whatever you plan to do to consider the betterment of mankind. I could hear the calling a million miles away as my heartbeat fills the silence with words that I can't say. My mother used to tell me, she said, girl, time for you will come. So I sit back, I hold tight. My time has now begun, and I will never walk away. I'll just be brave and stay. Hold me to the end, and in your arms I'll rise up high. I look for tomorrow, I remember yesterday. Oh, when I was scared of the darkness, saying things that I shouldn't say. But now my life has changed. Just look what I've become. I don't sit back, I don't hold tight. No, my life has now begun, and I will never walk away. Just be brave and stay. Hold me to the end, and in your arms I'll rise up high. Life has been fine as a child until now, but oh, I found I keep on searching for something, searching for something, searching for something more.
Hi everyone, my name is Alana Sachs and I'm the Executive Director for Youth for Human Rights Victoria. The purpose of Youth for Human Rights International, a worldwide secular education program, is to educate youth on the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, thereby creating our next generation to become active advocates of peace and tolerance. Youth for Human Rights are extremely proud to be associated with the annual honouring of human rights activist William Cooper and the Australian Aborigines League for the last number of years. We are passionate about this remarkable story. William Cooper was an incredible role model for protecting human rights for others and being an active advocate for peace, respecting others despite their faith or skin colour, even though his own people had no rights of their own. As Human Rights Day approaches on the 10th of December, keep the story of William Cooper in your hearts. Human rights may seem an idealistic dream, but we can make human rights a reality, as William Cooper did with his perseverance and courage. Thank you.
My name is Nance Adler, and I teach Jewish history here in Seattle, Washington. In summer of 2019, I was the recipient through the We Are Here Foundation of a grant to come and teach about how I create upstanders in my classroom. In preparation for coming to Australia, I learned about a particularly Australian upstander, William Cooper, and I was amazed at his courage and his humanity in coming to protest about the treatment of Jews during Kristallnacht in Germany and Austria, when he himself was not even recognized as a human being yet in Australia, and learning about his work with the Aboriginal League and for the rights of not only his own people, but for the rights of Jews was so inspiring, and I was thrilled to get to come back and share it with my students here in Seattle as we learn about those who stood up for the Jews in that very difficult time.
In our history class, we learned about land acknowledgements connected to the Aboriginal people of Australia, and I would like to state we are on occupied Coast Salish land. Learning about the owners and origins of this land showed me the lack of dignity we bestow on others and how we understate the importance of our land's origins. Uncle William Cooper was an upstander. He stood up for other people's rights when he didn't have any himself. As a Jew, to know that a person with very little power and even fewer rights stood up for the plight of European Jews means that there is still humanity, empathy, and dignity in this world. As a Jew, and as a young member of society, it is invaluable to know there are other people out there making the world a better place.
As a 16-year-old, I feel even teenagers like me in Berlin, Germany, need to learn the universal message of the Australian Aboriginals League. I had heard of this amazing story before when I went to Australia myself in 2019 and visited Sydney's Jewish Museum, and I remembered it again during this project. So my friend and I decided to include this story into our project because we wanted more people of our own age to learn about the story. We even arranged to call Uncle Boydie in Shepparton, Australia, which has been one of the most valuable and memorable experiences ever. The main lesson I learned is, be brave, be open-minded, and stand up for yourself and others. And also, be persistent and never give up.
Hi, my name's Luca and I'm a Year 11 student of Bialik College. I wrote this extract a year ago in a religion and society class, and Abe has invited me to share it with you today. As Jews, we are in a unique situation to empathise with our Aboriginal brothers and sisters due to the parallel commonalities in our histories of persecution and genocide. We are both minority groups who share a deep connection to our homelands, the land that was given to us by our forefathers and destined for us to live in forever and ever. Having experienced the tragedy of the Holocaust and its legacy, as well as having been forcibly removed from our homelands, we as Jews are commanded to not oppress the stranger, for we were once strangers in the land. Just like William Cooper, who had no basic human rights and was classified as subhuman, stood up for the Jews after the horrors of Kristallnacht, it is our responsibility to empathise with and support the Indigenous Australians who continue fighting to retain their freedom and rights to this day.
So incensed was Uncle William that he joined together with William Ferguson and Jack Patton in Sydney on the sesquicentenary, the 150th anniversary of white colonisation, and instead of celebrating, they organised a day of mourning in Australia Hall. Some 79 years later, Uncle Boydie himself was able to enter that very hall.
Always writing letters. He wrote letters to kings and prime ministers and politicians, whoever he thought might help him get some help for his people.
Uncle Boydie was on the road again, this time to Sydney, to meet Prince William at Admiralty House. The Australian Parliament interceded, and an aide of then Prime Minister Tony Abbott prevented the document on the grounds of protocol to be handed to Prince William. So close.
This is a petition that the grandfather had in 1937 to send to the King of England, and also a letter that he wrote to the King about the treatment of Aboriginal people in Australia. Well, I'm just taking this up to Canberra to present it to the Governor-General.
May I call you Uncle Boydie?
Yes, please.
Thank you very much indeed for dropping in to see me. I've been looking forward to this moment. I do this all the time.
Great, you're all here. That's
fantastic. All right.
2, 3.
In August of 2014, Peter Cosgrove found himself at Balmoral Castle, where he became knighted Sir Peter, and in that meeting he had a very special delivery from the hands of Uncle Boydie. Back in 1917, his son Daniel Cooper had enlisted in the Allied infantry forces and sadly was killed in action in Belgium.
Star, the British War Medal and the Victory Medal. Today,
The following year, in fact, the image of Dan Cooper was immortalised on the walls of the Shepparton City Council. In fact, the mural of Uncle Dan complements a beautiful mural of Uncle William Cooper himself, also in the city of Shepparton. And the third piece of art has been the unveiling of a statue of Uncle William Cooper in the centre of Queen's Park.
Nice to meet you.
Nice
Lovely
to meet you too. Thank you
sorry.
for having us in your house.
You're welcome. It's his house too.
When people came and knocked on the door, I came and opened the door, brought them in and sat them around with chairs, and then I had to go. Grandfather in bed couldn't sit around, couldn't get up to go out.
So they have their
So
meetings
the
in
chairs,
here.
yeah.
Go into the moment of dedication in the Jewish festival of Hanukkah, because the time has come, the sun has set, the 5 Hanukkah candles are waiting to be lit on now, the mid-moment of Hanukkah.
And defiantly march to the German grounds. William Cooper. Whoa.
And one thing we want to do, we're working with the federal government at the moment and state government and generating charity for our charity arms, is to build a new centre, a new community centre, which want to house women's football, with the growth of women's football. When we were talking about the name, I think Leonie and Uncle Boyd had a profound impact about, what is that iconic person to support. We've done the Sir Doug Nicholls round and he's got due recognition there. But we felt like, someone who could sort of bridge the gap between white and black Australia, but also promote diversity, and there's no better man than Uncle William Cooper for that. And we're committed to creating the William Cooper Centre at Punt Road, which we want to establish behind the goals here.
I'm Mike Zervos, the CEO at B'nai Courage to Care Victoria. We're proud to be a part of today's important event and honoured to have Uncle Boydie, William Cooper's grandson, as our patron. The aim of Courage to Care is to educate on the dangers of racism, discrimination, prejudice and bullying, and we do this through our Upstander programs. At these programs, we share examples through history of people who haven't stood by but have in fact taken action. We call them Upstanders. William Cooper's actions on the 6th of December 1938 are a fine example and inspiration to all of this upstander behaviour. As part of our 30-30 vision, our aim is, over the next few years, is to share William Cooper's inspiration and legacy with a further 30,000 Victorian students. Thank you for being part of such an important day today.
1938 was a momentous year in world history and also in the history of Australia. In 1938, in January to be precise, leaders of the Aboriginal people of Australia gathered in the Australian Hall in Sydney to protest against the tyranny of white oppression against the Aboriginal people. Later that year, one of these elders, Uncle William Cooper, found it within himself to draw others into a protest march from Footscray in Melbourne to the German consulate to deliver a letter of protest to the German consulate against the atrocities of Kristallnacht. But these very same people continued the fight for Aboriginal rights, and it was my privilege in September 2017 to have been part of an event commemorating Uncle William and others in the very same Australian Hall in Sydney. Uncle William Cooper's memory is perpetuated also in the Sydney Jewish Museum with an exhibit that was first launched in 2010. In 2017, when the museum was reopened by then Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull, an upgraded exhibition on William Cooper was unveiled. Ladies and gentlemen, we salute the memory of these leaders who stood not just for Aboriginal rights, but for the rights of all of us.
Hello, my name is Jason Steinberg, the Vice President of the Queensland Jewish Board of Deputies, and it's my privilege to be part of today's commemoration and celebration of William Cooper's walk. Here in Queensland, we've had a commitment from the federal, state and local governments to establish a permanent Holocaust museum so we can remember stories like William Cooper. A few years ago, Uncle Boydie came to Queensland, and at that moment, he spoke about his grandfather, William Cooper. For those who were there at the University of Queensland, we were honoured to hear those stories. And they're the stories that visitors to the Queensland Holocaust Museum and Education Centre will hear. It's those stories that need to be shared, because William Cooper stood up. He stood up when he saw intolerance and racism, and that's what everyone should learn. So we will welcome Uncle Boydie to come to Queensland when we open this museum in the coming years. Thank you.
Here we are at my great hero, William Cooper, who was one of the very, very few individuals who stood up for us in those horrible, dark days. He was like a bright star against hatred, brutality, injustice. A wonderful, wonderful human being against indifference, and his stand has been very, very significant for our people, knowing that somebody really cared about us, and it also shows what a single individual can do, what an enormous difference one can make towards mankind. When he was eventually recognised after many years of work, lobbying. It was a wonderful satisfaction, and I felt truly elated. His inspiration, compassion, will and spirit will live on.
It is with great pleasure that I think back to Uncle Boydie's visit to Berlin in 2017. I found it very touching when Uncle Boydie, 80 years later, handed over to me the petition initiated in 1938 by his grandfather, Aboriginal activist William Cooper, and signed by many Aboriginal activists, expressing their protest against disenfranchisement and persecution of Jews in Germany. We are so pleased that Uncle Boydie, at the age of 89, would travel all the way to Berlin from Australia to complete the task that his grandfather began, therefore representing his grandfather along with the entire AAL membership of 1938. Officially, on behalf of the government of Chancellor Angela Merkel, we are sorry that the 1938 Consul General in Melbourne would not accept the letter of the Aborigines League, nor forward it on to the political leadership here in Berlin, as would have been the right and morally correct thing for a consular official to do. The solidarity shown at the other end of the world with people in greatest trouble is a role model and impressive until today. Unfortunately, there were very few examples like this. It is the more important today to remember especially those people in those days who chose to do the right thing. They point us into the right direction regarding our today's remembrance culture, and our political action. Officially, receiving Uncle Boydie here exactly 3 years ago on behalf of the German Foreign Office will always be remembered as an important step in our dealing with this terrible chapter of our history. As Uncle Boydie now celebrated his 92nd birthday, we wish him good health. And we thank him for reminding us that so long as doing the right moral thing remains our guiding values, even those without any basic human rights of their own can be upstanding for others and call out injustice and persecution wherever in the world others might be suffering. I am very grateful to Uncle Boydie for keeping the remembrance of his hero grandfather and his courageous fellow campaigners alive, and to the Aboriginal people of Australia for this vital lesson. And let me take the opportunity to also directly address and expressly thank the descendants of all those Aboriginal activists who took a stance on behalf of the Jews who were persecuted the previous 2 days during what later became known as the Reichskristallnacht on 9th of November 1938. Thank you.
William Cooper had the vision of a greater picture, and he understood the need for all people to look after one another and not just to be focused on themselves. He understood that when you look out, you see people, you see humankind. You don't see a black person, a white person, a Jewish person, a Muslim person. You just see people, and we are all responsible for one another.